Well, hello everybody. I'm Jenevieve Delossantos. I am an associate teaching professor at Rutgers, where I am an art historian, but I am also someone who's working on the scholarship of teaching and learning. And I do a lot of faculty development, and that's the capacity that I'll be speaking to you in today. So I want to thank Carrie Mae Weems and Melissa Ewan and everybody here who've invited me to talk about how we approach these kinds of monuments in the classroom. And so I want to start with a confession that when I was asked to come, I thought, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to talk about. Okay. I'm going to talk about trauma-informed pedagogy, which is something that I will reference today and something that I've been working in. But then something happened in between the invitation and today, and that was that I was teaching. So I had this experience in my classroom that kind of changed the way I want to frame my conversation today, or my presentation today. And so I am teaching Art of the United States from 1776 to 1913, which is problematic, but that's what I'm teaching, okay? It's the first time I have taught this in over 10 years. Actually, the last time I taught it, I was a graduate student. And so I was prepping new materials and dutifully was putting this slide of Monticello in my PowerPoint when I became profoundly ambivalent, to kind of quote you, Paul, about whether or not I should even teach this. Like, should I teach Monticello? Does this space and this history deserve a space of primacy in the art history canon, right, or in my classroom? And I became kind of acutely aware that by choosing to do that, what am I not giving space to? What am I not teaching my students? And so I decided, though, because of course I had this epiphany about 15 minutes before class, as is the way, we'll keep it real, I decided that I would keep it, and I would ask my students this question directly. Do you think that I should continue to teach this? Do you want to talk about this? And I thought for sure, knowing my students at Rutgers, really diverse campus, really wonderful, engaged students, that they would be like, no, do not teach this anymore. We don't want to hear it. Unanimously, every single student in my class said yes. Teach Monticello. And I was puzzled. I was like, I don't understand. So I decided, well, how does this then relate to monuments? And so what I decided to do was survey them. So I created a Google form, and I asked my students, well, okay, so I hear you about Monticello, but what do you think about these contested monuments? And so I posed a series of different questions. I'm going to show you some highlights here today. And again, I'm not, if I have a sociologist in the room, I'm an art historian making a quick survey for my class. Okay, so it's not a perfect survey, and it's a small sampling, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless. So I asked my students here, what are your feelings about monuments of complicated historical figures like Christopher Columbus? And the results surprised me. So 33% of them said a counter monument should be installed. 27.8% of them said these monuments should be recontextualized with text or art or different narratives. 16.7% said that these monuments should be taken down and removed from their current location. And then the remainder of them wrote their response in, but I'm paraphrasing. They all suggested that they should be removed in some other capacity. Absolutely none of the students who took this survey said that the monument should remain in place without any other kind of modification. So for me, I was surprised. I'm like, so there was such a unanimous agreement that I should continue to teach Monticello. But every student said, no, these monuments in the public space, right, need to be altered, they need to come down. So again, I went back to class and I said, can we talk about your responses? I'm puzzled what's going on here. And of course, it could be many things, right, that we're talking about Thomas Jefferson, or we're talking about a historical site, right, versus a constructed monument. But my suspicion was that it was something else, and I was right. So my students said that, well, we're in the classroom, and that's public space. And so I said, what does the classroom mean to you? And here's what they reported. They said that the classroom felt like a safe space to try out their ideas. It's a space where they can confront difficult historical truths with the aid of their instructor, with a guide. It's a space where they can debate openly and learn from each other. It's a space which is low stakes compared to the outside world, where they can explore ideas in theory, but not in practice. And so again, I'm thinking live in the classroom. and going, I want to just acknowledge that this isn't what the classroom is for everybody, right? That there are power dynamics within a classroom and within higher education. And it was so interesting to me that those things were invisible and not part of the narrative that my students were expressing. It kind of parallels the power dynamics that we're talking about with monuments themselves. And so what I wanted to do today was kind of pose this question. What opportunity does the classroom space afford us in the ongoing discussion of contested monuments? Judging that students feel that they can use this space as a testing ground for their ideas. What opportunity does this give us? And so I thought that I would start with my learning goals as a good educator, right? So here's what I want them to learn in the classroom. I want them to understand how the visual language of monumentality functions, why societies continue to gravitate towards these visual qualities, the complex power dynamics involved in the creation, installation, and continued care of monuments, the legacy of these objects today, and the ways, the variety, and that's weird, we can deal with these legacies today. But, and this is important to me as an educator, as an art historian, and as a person, I also want my students to learn in my class how to be kind, empathetic, informed citizens, good listeners, creative problem solvers, and more. To me, those learning goals are equally as important as the ways in which I need to engage with the content. So the way that I approach these things is through a trauma-informed lens. And this terminology has, I think, become far more present post-COVID. And that's when I really kind of dove in. And so trauma-informed pedagogy comes from trauma-informed care, and what I'm showing you on the screen now is an infographic of the 6 pillars of trauma-informed care as defined by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Those 6 pillars are safety, trustworthy and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and the acknowledgement, it's kind of the acknowledgement of cultural, historical, and gender issues. So to take this and apply it to pedagogy is for the instructor to acknowledge and make space for the fact that the students who come into your classroom bring with them a wide variety of traumas that we probably should and likely will never know, right? Traumas, of course, coming out of the pandemic, but related to race, to socioeconomic status, to educational shaming, right? And they bring those things into the classroom. And so for me as an art historian, working with powerful images, this became vitally important to my practice. And I'll share with you just quickly 3 student interactions that really cemented my philosophy here. I had a student tell me that she had to walk out from class while we were talking about a survivor of sexual assault who's an artist, and that she just couldn't be in the space anymore. I had another student tell me after class that she wept at home reading bell hooks, I signed bell hooks in my women in art class, and that it was the first time she felt heard or valued, right, in the course content, in what I assigned. I then had another student who I was advising a research project on, who was doing this beautiful project exploring her identity through family photos, and she encountered photos from the World's Fair in St. Louis. And she recognized, and this is how she articulated it to me, that she loves Meet Me in St. Louis, and she realized she could never be Judy Garland. She would be on display. And I stopped in my tracks. And I said, I am responsible with introducing my students to legacies, histories, and images that are going to make them feel. And if I don't take steps to create spaces where they can confront these things, I guess as safely as possible, it's never safe, right? I'm doing them a disservice, okay? And the other piece of this is that it actually impedes learning, right? When you're triggered or traumatized, you're not going to be able to have the same cognitive functions. Okay, so I am distilling for today, for a short period of time, so we have time to be in conversation, those 6 pillars into 2 kind of main categories that shape the way that I teach my content. And for me, I emphasize community, building community in the classroom, and transparency as a key kind of principle that guides our community. And so my classroom communities are built on mutual respect, inclusion of all voices, experiences, and perspectives, even ones that might be counter, right? And this is where the complication comes from. Open-mindedness and peer support. And what I wanted to do today was to I'm sure there's a lot of educators in the audience, was to give you some concrete strategies as to how I do this and how you might if you're interested as well. This is a kind of iterative process and it's personal. And so I am just going to share with you what's worked for me. Some of the things that come to mind are developing things like classroom norms and contracts, normalizing mistakes and discomfort as part of learning, right? Getting students ready to sit with how uncomfortable things are. It's part of the learning process. Humanizing yourself as the instructor and taking an interest in students as whole people. The one strategy here I'm going to emphasize is how to create classroom norms as a community building strategy. And so this is something I do in all of my classes, regardless of the content. I actually pose a question to my class that says, what makes for the best classroom community? What do you all need from me and from each other so that you feel supported? And then I open this up, I get their responses, and I apologize for the wall of text, I'm going to paraphrase, all right? I'm going to paraphrase, but I ask them to build it themselves, not from me. If I want them to understand the complex power dynamics of the objects that we've been talking about today, I cannot top down tell them what they need or tell them how they should be in these spaces. And so I construct this in dialogue with my students. And this is actually our classroom contract for this semester right now. And so I'm just highlighted kind of in this orange yellow some key things that they suggested, right? They want to create a classroom community that is positive, active, and engaging. They want to center our classroom around positivity, mutual support of each other, empathy, and kindness. They want to come together in their shared interests as learners. They want to be open-minded to new ideas and non-judgmental of opinions, okay? And they commit to disagreeing respectively and productively, even if we are confronting ideas that make us feel uncomfortable. They agree to treat each other and the instructor with respect and forgive each other / find resolution when those hot moments happen. As a class, we will be open-minded about the feelings and concerns of our peers and grow from feedback. So I use this as a contract. Like I put this up, we refer back to it, but it completely shapes the way I think we can engage with these difficult histories and these difficult objects. Now, I don't want to like toot my own horn, but I think the response that the students had about how safe and how productive they felt the classroom space is could be tied to some of this language. So in the rest of my survey, I asked them, when someone in class disagrees with my opinion about what to do with contested monuments, almost 90% said that they feel it's a fair perspective and I am open to listen, right? Open to listening. Only one said that they're ambivalent and one said I need to push harder to prove my point. When I asked them how they feel about having debates around monuments in the class, again, almost 90% said that they enjoy it and they want to have these discussions. The other part I'll just go through quickly is to emphasize, to kind of lead with transparency, right? To acknowledge the difficulty of the moment, of the objects, of the history, to set clear goals for your students about learning, goals for discussion, goals for analyzing, providing the context, and guiding the students back to the historical facts. Emotions matter, but facts, like we're not going to deny historical truth because it makes us upset, right? I also encourage us, and I do this, to do some self-reflection. Where do I stand on these issues? How might I be triggered in a conversation? Where am I not listening to others? And if it doesn't go well, here are some strategies that you can use to kind of work through these difficult moments. So we kind of went over the first one, but taking a moment to cool down, immediately addressing any issues of bias in the classroom live, okay? Deflecting and redirecting. Don't hesitate to stop a conversation if it's not productive. You can come back to it, you can pivot, you can have them write, you can do other things, right? Because again, the goal is maintaining that community structure, right, where they're supporting each other. And so to conclude, just some concluding thoughts. I think that teaching contested monuments affords us the opportunity to instill in our students empathy for each other, kindness, creative problem solving, open-mindedness of other perspectives, right? But for me, the most important thing is that I want to teach our students that yes, history matters, yes, objects matters, but people always matter more, and we can model that together and then take it outside of there. So I'll just conclude on that note, and I want to just thank all of you and thank my students at Rutgers University, New Brunswick for providing me with such interesting data and thoughts for our presentations. Thank you so much. I'll sit until he's done.